If you ride your bike often enough, you may end up with a flat tire. In today's video, we're going to break down the key skills that you need to be able to change a flat tire on the side of the road and the tools I carry every single day with me, no matter how long the bike ride is, to be able to change a flat tire. A couple of quick notes and tips. First off, this video is specific to changing the actual flat on your wheel. We are not going to discuss at all how to remove the wheel from your bike. In the near future, we will have videos covering how to remove wheels from different types of Tern bicycles. So if there is a specific bike that you have a question about, post it below. The next thing I want to say is it's okay if you have absolutely no interest in learning how to change a flat tire. While I do feel confident that anyone, no matter your mechanical ability, can learn how to change a flat tire, if you have no interest and it's keeping you from riding your bike, just figure out a different plan. Maybe that's you buy roadside assistance and insurance. Maybe you always have a friend or family member on call when you go for a bike ride. Whatever it is, just make sure you have a plan so that if you do get a flat, you are ready. With those notes, let's get our legal disclaimer out of the way and get started. As a disclaimer, I am a professionally trained mechanic. The following steps, if not performed properly, can be dangerous. So I do recommend consulting your local Tern dealer for one-on-one education when possible. Now that those things are out of the way, let's get started with what tools I carry every day on my bike in case I get a flat. Today we're going to be changing a flat on my Tern HSD P9. This is a 20-inch tube, and I'm just going to use the tools that I carry in my flat kit for this bike. So let me grab those. In this bag is all the tools I need to be able to change a flat on the side of the trail. So let me show you what I use, and then we'll walk through how to use these tools. First up is a pair of gloves. I personally don't want to be grimy and dirty if I need to fix my bike on the side of the road and then show up to work or dinner or something like that. So I carry a pair of mechanics gloves, latex, or even gardening gloves in all of my flat kits. And this is something that I immediately put on if I need to adjust something on my bike. And depending on how dirty my bike is, I might put these on before even pumping up my tires every week. The next thing you'll need is some type of inflation device. I'm not going to get into the details of different types of inflation devices, but just know there are a couple of different types, like a hand pump or a CO2 system that is much faster, but definitely more costly, and you really need to know what you're doing to use one of these. If you're interested in inflation devices to carry along with you, please let us know in the comments below, and I can create a different video. After inflation, we look at tire levers. Tire levers are what are gonna help you pull off the tire from your wheel. They come in packs of either 2 or 3, and I'll show you in a second how to use these. You need a tube or a patch kit. Personally, I carry both. Make sure the tube is the right size for the bike that you're riding. You can find the size of the tube that you'll need on the side of your tire. It'll be something like 20 by 2.0. You can also ask your local bike shop and pick up one there. The reason I also carry a patch kit is because if I am only carrying a tube and I get more than one flat, I'm out of luck. While patch kits like this one that you'll find on the Tern tool have anywhere from 4 to 6 patches, which means 4 to 6 flat tubes. Typically, I'm going to change the flat with the new tube and then keep the old tube and reuse it in the future by patching it at home. But again, I'm carrying new tube and patch kit just in case. We need a good multi-tool if you have either 15mm nuts securing your wheel or a through axle wheel style. For example, the Link A7 has bolt-on wheels, and you'll need a 15mm tool like you find on the Tern tool to loosen these bolts. The new GSD and HSD also have through axle wheel styles. So you're gonna need an Allen tool to pull out the through axle and then be able to remove your wheel. Those are all the tools that I personally carry and recommend to any new bike buyer to have in their pack so they're ready if they get a flat. Now that we've covered the tools, let's talk about how to use them. This is a front wheel off of a HSD P9. It has disc brakes, and the reason I'm noting this, one, if you got a flat while riding, this disc brake rotor could be pretty hot. So you don't want to accidentally touch it, press it against your body, so keep that away from you. And the second reason is you never want to touch it with your fingers because the oil from your fingers or the grease from your hands could get on your rotor and make your brakes not work as well. They'll start howling, and depending how much grease is built up on there, they may stop working. So make sure you never touch your rotor with dirty hands. Even if you think they're clean, they probably aren't. So I'm gonna keep the rotor away from my body, and I'm gonna be changing the flat on this side, the non-disc side of my wheel. Before I get started in pulling off the tire and tube, I wanna see what gave me the flat. And I wanna make sure there's nothing sticking out of my tire that could cut me. So I'm gonna quickly look around at the tread of my tire, see if I see anything in it that looks different. So I have a small piece of glass in here, and what I'm gonna do is just use a key or a credit card to pull that out. I'm not going to guarantee that that's what gave me the flat. In a second, I'm gonna show you a few different tips of how to figure out what gave you the flat. Great, now that I know there's nothing sticking out of the tire that could cut me, I'm gonna grab my tire lever and then go to the valve and just let out any air that might be left in the tire. And this is gonna make it much easier to pull the tire off. All right, I've let out all the air, and now I'm going to take either my thumbs or the palm of my hand and push the tire away from the rim. What I'm doing here is unhooking the bead of the tire from the hook of the rim. This is a good thing that your tires are nicely seated and nice and snug, but it might add some difficulty to removing that tire if it's really stuck on there. So I found pushing with my hands around it will help just get the tire off a lot faster and easier. Next, I'm gonna take my tire lever, just one of them at this step, and using the scoop end right here, I'm gonna scoop the bead of the tire, just one side of it. So I'm gonna find the valve, and I'm gonna go to the opposite side of the valve on the rim. And so what I'm doing is scooping the tire. And now what I'm gonna do is just push or pull, whichever I feel strongest doing, the tire all the way around the wheel. Awesome, we are halfway done changing this flat. The next step, I'm going to go from the opposite side of the valve again, and then carefully pull out this tube. And I'm doing it carefully because I intend to patch this and reuse it if I can. So just pulling it all the way around to the valve. And at the valve, I'm gonna move the tire out of the way and over so that I can just pull the valve of the tube out. There is a chance I'm gonna need to use this tube in a second if I couldn't figure out what gave me the flat. So I'm gonna keep this handy. Next, I'm gonna check the inside of the tire for glass, staples, all sorts of things. I have been doing this for a long time, so I feel pretty comfortable running my fingers around on the inside, but I do wanna give a warning to be careful so you don't cut yourself. So visually check inside and then check by hand. I believe what gave me the flat was that piece of glass, but let's pretend I didn't find anything at all that gave me a flat. So what I'm gonna do is put this wheel aside for one moment and go back to my used tube. And what I wanna do is add air until I can figure out where the air is escaping from here. It's gonna typically be one of three things. The first thing is, well, you have a hole on the outside of your tube. And you just need to figure out from there what gave you the flat in your tire. I do that by taking the valve, lining the valve up with the valve hole. And so let's say my hole on my tube was here. And what I want to do is check here on my tube and then also flip it, because it is a round circle, and check here. So if my hole is here, it's either going to be here or over here. Pretty straightforward. Now, if the hole was inside, that could mean that the rim strip inside of my wheel has moved and exposed the holes for the spokes of my rim, and your local bike shop can help you out with that. The next two options are potentially user error. The first really common one is at your valve. Maybe there's a hole somewhere around the valve hole. And this is normally because, one, when you were pumping up with a floor pump, you weren't super careful and maybe yanked the pump head and pulled the valve a little bit hard. The other thing that I see a lot is people that store their bikes in a garage or maybe leaning up against other bikes, and they catch this valve either on hooks where they're storing it or on pedals when the bikes are kind of smashed together. So you want to make sure nothing ever hits this valve, because when it's under pressure, if you bend it just a little bit, there's a chance that you're going to tear a hole in it. And then the last thing is what we call a snake bite. This is when you pinch your tube between the rim of the wheel, and that has two sides, so that causes the snake bite, and then the ground. So you're essentially just squishing this really hard, and it pops because it doesn't have enough pressure. This can also happen if you hit a pothole hard enough or a curb or something like that, and you're essentially just popping the tube between your body weight and the ground. Those last two things, you can't really patch for the snake bite and the valve being damaged. So at that point, this tube just needs to be recycled and turned into something else. Now that you've figured out what gave you the flat, we can now replace the tube. New tubes come pretty flat and they have no shape to them. So the first step is to remove your valve cover here and add a little bit of air to give this a little bit of shape, because it will help you put the tube in the tire a little bit easier. So here it is with a little bit of shape. What I'm gonna do is find my valve hole. Here it is. Make sure my tire is lined up. So here's my label with the valve. And the reason I wanna do this is, one, aesthetics, it looks good. But two, if you remember that step where we lined up the tire with the tube with the hole, you can line up the valve with this label, and it just makes it a little bit faster than finding your valve hole every time. Now what I'm gonna do is, at the valve hole, I'm gonna take the tire and move it out of the way so the valve hole is exposed. I'm gonna take my valve, push it through so it's nice and straight, super important. We don't wanna make it crooked. And then carefully pull my tire over, making sure I don't pinch the tube between the wheel and the tire. And then I'm just going around, tucking it up in the tire. There we go. Now, I wanna let out all of that extra air that I just added to my tube. Starting at my valve, I'm going to use my thumbs or my palms and slowly roll the tire onto the rim. I want to ensure that the tube is not stuck between the tire and the rim, because it will get pinched and you're going to be back to changing another flat tire. So what I'm doing is just carefully going around, pushing that tire on. If you haven't done this before, it's going to be frustrating. I highly suggest doing it for the first time, either in your garage or living room, or better yet, at your local bike shop, where they can help you on this step, because it does require a little bit of finesse. I'm almost done, but this is super tight. So what I'm gonna do is, where I already have the tire on, I'm gonna gather the tire in the middle of the rim. Nice and gentle, not damaging the tube inside. And that gives me a little bit of more room for the tire, and I can just a little bit easier to pull it back on. I'm now checking to make sure the tube is not sticking out and that it is all the way up in my tire. Looks great. So now I'm gonna add just a little bit of air and double check that the tube is not sticking out at all. If it's not, I'm gonna pump it up fully to pressure. These tires, I personally run about 45 on my HSD. So let me bring this up to pressure, and then I have a couple last tips for you. Before I consider this finished, I wanna make sure that the tire is on the rim nice and straight. And to do this, I grab the middle of my bike wheel and carefully spin it. And what I'm checking for is to make sure the tire doesn't hop up and down at all on the rim. If it did, I'm gonna let out a little bit of air and just massage the tire back into place. This one looks great. This tire is now ready to roll. Changing a flat tire sounds and feels very overwhelming the first few times you do it. My greatest suggestion is to try to do it at a local bike shop on like a flat fixing night. Or if, especially right now, you can't do that, do it in your living room. Reference these tips as you're doing it in a low stress environment. So when you need it on the side of the road, you have done it before and you're not figuring it out as cars blow by and you're stressed. This video is part of a series for basic bike maintenance. My goal here is to just help you continue to ride more confidently and hopefully keep your bike out of the shop with these small things that you can learn to become a more confident and capable rider and to continue to ride happily on your Tern. Thanks for watching this whole video. I really appreciate it. Please leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you, what bike you're riding, what questions you may have. Until the next video, stay well, and thank you for choosing Tern Bicycles.